Ladies and gentlemen, on the Experience right now, a man that I said just a little while ago, I've first knew as Daryl Van Horn, but we call him the devil. We call him the sinister minister, but he's Father James Mitchell, who has graciously agreed to leave his current real life and talk about wrestling again for the first time in a long time. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How the hell are you?
I'm the same as always, really, just a little calmer about it. A little calmer.
All right, a happier curmudgeon.
I stay away from most of the things that make me crazy. But let's start off.
And yet we have Bolin on the show sometimes. Go figure.
It makes me look good because I've got to be sane next to him. But
it's an act of charity, is what it is. An act of charity.
Before we talk about wrestling, tell the people, for those who only know you as Father James Mitchell, the devil incarnate, this sick, twisted, cult-leading mind of wrestling, tell the folks what you're doing right now.
I am a singer / karaoke host, and actually have been since about, I was still with ECW, right at the end of ECW for, I guess, since 2000, 2001. So I crooned for old ladies in timeshare resorts here in the Disney area in Orlando. And that's pretty much what I do. So I go out there looking like the devil and sing Frank Sinatra songs.
It's become more lucrative for you on a consistent basis than professional wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, by the time ECW went out of business, I pretty quickly built the karaoke empire into. I mean, I was making like wrestling money doing that, and then TNA came around. And that was kind of ideal because when they were in Nashville, I only had to leave once a week. And then they moved here in my backyard at Universal Studios. So that was ideal because, you know, I was making killer money doing my karaoke thing and not having to deal with all the bullshit and politics of wrestling or travel or, you know, get stuck in airports and all the unglamorous part of the wrestling business. So TNA was like a hell of a part-time job. You know, so I got all the benefits of being a R-list TV star, you know, and none of the downside of it. So it's I continue to sing for my supper. And that's, I guess, what I'll be doing until the day I die.
And I believe you. I believe you also run the karaoke night at the NWA Legends Fan Fest. Will you be doing that again this year?
He has not called me yet, but I will. As far as I know, I think the schedule is open for that. I try to make time for it because it's the one time a year that I get to actually be around people that enjoy good wrestling and, you know, get to hang around with real wrestlers and people who had charisma and the people I grew up seeing. So hopefully I'll be there again this year.
Awesome.
You said you told me the other day we talked on the phone. You said, "Yeah, I'm singing for my supper." From the last time I saw you, you've evidently been singing quite a bit, but never the boom.
That is
but
true.
You got into wrestling actually probably right before you started working for me in Smoky Mountain. How did you get interested in wrestling as a fan and then as a participant?
Well, as a little kid, I was obsessed with Universal monsters, the old ones you'd get on Shock Theater, you know, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and whatnot, and Marvel Comics, supervillains, superheroes, and Evel Knievel. So as a little kid, now at this point I'm probably like 8 years old, the neighborhood bullies come around one day and beat my ass, and they're yelling out wrestling moves and, you know, yelling out Homer Odell and Johnny stuff like that. I have no idea what's happening. I'm just getting the shit beat out of me.
Homer Odell.
And actually what they would do is they would lure me into their house and go, "Here, let's trade comic books." And then the big guys would jump out of the closet and beat shit out of me.
So, oh, no. So they were heel programming you into the house. And oh, my God.
Yeah. So anyhow, we wind up becoming friends pretty soon. And Jeff G. Bailey, who I think you know him, he's like been Bill Barron's lead manager for 15 years or something.
Wildside.
Yeah, Wildside, Anarchy, whatever it's called.
Anarchy,
now.
Yes.
He was the guy. So he got me started down this road. So this was about late 1974 or so, about the time Ric Flair had just come out, I think, into Mid-Atlantic, which was the wrestling that was on after the cartoons went off. And so I got to watch that great period when George Scott had taken over Mid-Atlantic, and you had Valentine, you had Wahoo, Mulligan, just a great roster. So I became obsessed with that stuff because these guys were kind of like monsters and superheroes and supervillains and Evel Knievel all combined, So,
and actually, you're scaring me, Devil, because we have so much in common that I didn't realize that. Now I'm starting to think that I could potentially lose my mind next, like you have. But go ahead.
Potentially, that ship has sailed, Jim. I'm sorry.
That horse has left the barn, cowboy.
So I became like really obsessed with it to the point of getting in trouble with school. And this is kind of funny. So, kids do backyard wrestling and whatnot, whatever, when you're a little kid, you see it. Well, me and Jeff had gotten a hold of all the old Apter magazines by hook or crook in various ways. And we became enamored with the Blackjacks, Mulligan and Lanza. And Blackjack Mulligan was like the lead heel on Crockett. So we decided that we were going to form a heel neighborhood tag team and be the Blackjacks, Blackjack Mitchell and Blackjack Wilson, which is his real last name. Now get this. Our outfit consisted of this. Everybody gets those Roy Roger cap pistol sets for Christmas when you're a little kid.
Oh, yeah, I've got some hanging here in the office. Of course, yes.
So we would take those little hats, right, which were like red or brown. We'd put those on. Then we're wearing bathing suits. My bathing suit had Alfred E. Newman's face on its ass. and we wore dingo boots. Do you remember those from the 70s? Dingo boots?
Yeah, the furry ones?
No, they were just like a regular boot.
Oh, I'm thinking of the boots that Dingo the Sundowner wore with the guy from Australia with the sheep.
No.
Nevertheless, no.
It's basically a dress boot, right? So we're in bathing suits with brown dress boots, not cowboy boots. And then we wanted to make the gloves. Well, instead of having enough sense to cut the fingers off of a real glove, which we eventually did, we would take a tube sock, color it with a black magic marker, then cut finger holes in it, then wear those. So
that sounds like a Mark I Mr. Sacco. That's what that reminds me of.
So
Foley owes you royalties.
Yeah. So we would go around the neighborhood picking fights with kids with our cardboard championship belts or whatever, looking like, if you can imagine that outfit, I'm telling you, looking like the two biggest assholes on earth, walking through the neighborhoods trying to get people to wrestle us. And the funny thing was, we would get
and here you are 40 years later still doing the same thing.
Exactly. So we would back then there were a lot of tennis courts and basketball courts and stuff that had big fences around them. So that was the perfect place to have a cage match. So we would walk up on older kids, like say 12, 13, 14 years old, they're playing basketball or tennis or whatnot, and sit there in our stupid little outfits taunting them. And they'd look at, eventually they get sick of it and they'd go, okay, you little pricks, get over here, let's wrestle. So they would beat our ass, and then we would climb over, after we got tired of having our ass beat, we would jump over the fence or climb up it and climb down and sit on the other side and taunt them and tell them, ha, we won, we climbed over the cage first, you suck.
But see, you forgot one key element of the Blackjacks tag team gimmick. Mulligan was 6'9" and Lanza was 6'6", and they were bigger
we were
than
like
everybody.
4'8" and 4 feet tall. Yeah. So anyhow, wrestling was just, was my love and my total obsession. And as I started, wrestling became uncool as puberty hit. So I got into rock and roll. So I decided I wanted to be a rock and roll guy. That lasted for several years. But I was always using elements of pro wrestling. So in the era of hair metal bands, where everybody said and did the same thing, all those videos look exactly the same, and they said the same stupid shit on stage. I was cutting Ric Flair promos and things like that, which made me a little different. And one night, before that, I had actually tried to, I went to Moolah's house because I lived in Columbia at the time. I went to Moolah's house She told
Oh
me.
my God, I would love to have been a fly on the wall at that meeting. You and the fabulous Moolah.
Well, yeah. Here's what was funny about that. Some wrestling magazine had come out. This is probably like 1986 or 87 at this point, and it was called Wrestling Eye. It was the first magazine that I recall ever having like kayfabe, dirt sheet kind of shit in it.
I remember it. Yes, very well. It was brief,
a little bit of information is a dangerous thing. So I walk into Moolah's house trying to bullshit her, which is also like walking into the land of Oz, because as you come up this big driveway, there's a bunch of little midgets hammering and banging on things, and they're up in the hood of her car working on stuff. And I walk in there, and she, basically, I think I weighed about $140 at the time. She just kind of looked at me, and I'm sitting there lying to her, trying to tell her I know all these wrestlers and this stuff about wrestling, based purely upon what I'd read in the back of Wrestling Eye magazine. And so she's sitting there looking at me like, oh, we got a live one. And then she brought the hammer down with, okay, we can do this. We need $3,000. Well, I didn't have $3,000, so that was the end of that. So I continued to, while I was doing rock and roll stuff in bars, to pester wrestling promoters and make these really shitty, promo tapes. And I sent one to Gene Anderson and one to Buzz Tyler, Avalanche Buzz Tyler, who had a promotion in Sumter, South Carolina. And I also at that point wasn't aware there was such a thing as indie wrestling until I saw that commercial that Buzz Tyler ran during the Mid-Atlantic show one afternoon, or Crockett show, whatever you would call it at that time. So on this tape, I'm sitting there with long metal hair, probably weigh 150, 160 pounds at the time. And I go into this long-winded 12-minute promo about how I was the Reverend Jimmy Ray Snake Handler, Chief Executive Officer of Love.
You have always. We got to get into a talk about religion later on. But you've always been one to just cut right to the meat of the matter on a promo.
I must say that reminds me of something that I once regaled my mother with. I was about 12 years old and we were leaving Louisiana, and I created a character called the Reverend Oral Sex. Which is still one of my favorite things. I was a reverend even then. I'll opine about that more, but go on, folks. Go on.
Yeah, so you were the Reverend Snake Handler.
The Reverend Jimmy Ray Snake Handler. And in this promo, so I'm the Reverend Jimmy Ray Snake Handler, the Chief Executive Officer of Love Brokers Enterprises, and pastor of the Church of Wrestling Unification. And as this promo goes on, I also reveal that I'm part of Love Brokers. Love Brokers Enterprises is an alcohol modeling service, which is a whorehouse, whatever. And I continue on to say that we also have a branch known as Love Brokers Video Enterprises, and that we're the nasty old codgers who brought you the Yuletide erotic classic, Yes, Vagina, There Is a Santa Claus. So it's basically 12 to 20 minutes of a clueless fuck sitting there being dirty, right? And not talking about wrestling at all. So I get a phone call from Buzz Tyler a month or two later. And Jeff answered the phone. We were roommates at the time. He goes, Jimmy, get up. Buzz is on the phone. So he's sitting there listening on the other line. And, my heart's racing. I'm all excited. And Buzz goes, Jimmy, I got your tape. He goes, but I'm going to tell you this. You'd make a good preacher or a porn star, but you don't know shit about wrestling. So he has me, he directs me. He says, look, you can talk and you got charisma, but I need you to make a tape about wrestling. So just make up something about Mr. X number 1 and 2 against me and Paul Jones or something. So I do that. Buzz never gets back. And I think his company went out of business like shortly after that. Meantime, I'm working at a record store. Gene Anderson calls me. Now here's childhood hero Gene Anderson. You can imagine. I'm about to have a fucking heart attack when this happens. He says, look, kid, you got the gift of gab, and you look good. And he goes, but we can't bring you in because you don't know anything. You got to learn to take your bumps and all this kind of stuff. So he says, I'm going to give your tape to Nelson Royal and Grizzly Smith over at Atlantic Coast Wrestling. So I send it to them, and they don't call back. I finally get a hold of them. Nelson Royale goes, yeah, I got the tape. I think I'm going to let you talk to Grizzly. Grizzly gets the phone. I'm like, hey, yeah, Reverend Jimmy Ray Snake Handler here. Did you get my tape? And he goes, I got your tape. If I played that, we'd get kicked off of every station that we run on. You are profane, and you're a blasphemer. And he cuts this big promo on me about being a perverted heathen, which in retrospect, here knowing what we've heard about Grizzly in recent years, he cut that promo on me. So moving forward, the next step was I'm doing rock and roll. I'm in a bar.
And by the way, I got to be honest with you. Your offbeat delivery and content is kind of what attracted me to them. But cool.
So I'm in a bar, and some other singer came in, and it was a biker bar, and I'm singing, and some other singer was there fucking with me in the front, in front of the stage, and I'm cutting wrestling promos on him. The rednecks are laughing about it. And he said something, and he had his own little Yoko Ono with him, like flip me off. So I grabbed a hanging plant. I climbed up on a little banister thing, grabbed that hanging plant, started spinning it around like one of those gaucho things, that they do in Argentina, and threw it. And it hit him, and it exploded. Potting soil goes everywhere, and it knocked all the bikers' drinks off. Now we've got a fucking riot about to happen. All the bikers were cool until I fucked their drinks up. So now all these people want to kill me. Out comes this big guy from the back to cool things off. Turns out he's the brother of the guy who owns the bar, and he's also a jobber for WWF. He's one of Moolah's guys that she would send up in a...
What was his name?
Bubba Kirk.
Say again?
Bubba Kirk. Outlaw Bubba Kirk.
I think I remember that name faintly. Anyway.
Yeah, so basically when they're saying shit to me like, man, you got a lot. He's saying you got a lot of heat. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I don't need any air conditioning. I have no idea what he's talking about. And he says, hey, kid, we need to get you into wrestling. I'm like, holy shit, that's what I want to do. So through him, and he never actually got me any work, but through him, I started meeting other people. So eventually I met a guy who got me on a shitty indie show, and I was all excited, and I thought, well, hell, I'm going to be a pro wrestling manager today. And I get there, and it's in Anderson, South Carolina. And the promoter's name, I think, is Bobby Holbrooks, who I believe trained the Mulkeys or used them a lot or something like that. But I get in there expecting to see a bunch of wrestlers. And there's a bunch of 140-pound guys with spandex falling off their ass because they're so skinny. Then there's little short guys with no, like total, whatever, little short guys with pot bellies and no arms. And then the other archetype that was all over outlaw wrestling back then are these big fat guys with beards who kind of look like Jerry Blackwell, and they all wear Panama hats. And all of the managers had a tennis racket and a phone, or a tennis racket and a phone. So I walk in there and I'm like, this isn't wrestling. What is this shit? I mean, I didn't know indie wrestling existed. So long story short from that, I pretty much walked in, and even though I didn't know what the hell was going on, I was able to bullshit my way up the card and then into other shows. Basically every time I went to a new outlaw promotion, I'd find the best guy on the card, become friends with him, then we'd go somewhere else, So it was like high school, just kind of kissing my ass up the card. And,
kissing your way up the ladder of ass.
Yes. So I did shitty indie shows forever. Greg Price was running South Atlantic Pro Wrestling. He had just taken it over from, I think, John Ringley and Paul Jones or somebody had it at the time. Or Robert Fuller maybe was running it at the time. But anyhow, Greg Price had taken it over. He brought me in. I did I think I did 3 shows for them. So at least I finally had something on TV, which I'm sure would have been part of what I sent you back in the day.
I can't remember, but I think it was.
Saturday, and in between that, so just to take you through my little emotional journey of getting there. The other thing that happened was I got turned on to the Wrestling Observer with Dave Meltzer. Nobody in those outlaw shows had that shit. Nobody knew what it was. You know what I mean? I got a hold of it, and suddenly And I wouldn't let anybody see this shit. I wouldn't let them know I had it. Suddenly, I became a genius.
Oh, you have the Rosetta Stone.
Yeah, and now I'm using now I kind of sound to these yahoos like I know what I'm talking about, and I would just quote shit directly that Meltzer had written, and suddenly I'm a genius. Now these people want to make me bookers, that kind of thing. But that was much earlier, before the Greg Price thing. So I'd gotten a Pro Torch yearbook or something, and I saw in it that you had put me over, and you had made the comment. Wade Keller, I guess, asked you, are there any independent managers?
Back when we still spoke.
That word didn't even exist then, I don't think. Are there any managers out there? What?
Wait a minute. Back when we still spoke, by the way, the guy you mentioned tonight. Yes, I don't want anybody to think that I'm, this was 20 years ago. So.
Yeah, this was like 1991 or 92, I think, this thing.
I don't want to give people the mistaken impression that I ever forgive a grudge, but go ahead.
Okay. So you had said in it, well, yeah, there is one guy, Daryl Van Horn. He can really talk, but he looks and dresses a little bit too much like Paulie Dangerously. But I think if he changed his gimmick a little bit, he could do it, because you can tell he really wants to do it, or some shit like that. So I'm sure I wrote you some fucking stupid kiss-ass letter after I saw that. And not long after that, maybe, I don't know, it probably was a year. It was 1993. I come home, and I get a message that Jim Cornette has called me. Oh, my God, what's happening? You informed me that you have a gimmick for me, and I'm all excited. Now I'm thinking, oh, man, he's going to put me with Bobby Eaton or Arn Anderson or whoever had been through there. Because at this point, my goal was to be like J.J. Dillon or something, or Bobby Heenan, and I wanted to manage like Harley Race kind of people, real wrestlers. And you announced, well, yes, it's going to be Prince Karras.
Yes, and now for something
3,000-year-old mummy.
And now let me just add this in your defense. It was because of your talent that I offered you this, because I don't know if everybody knows the story, but very briefly, Rick Rubin, who was my financial backer in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, did not often. He gave, his opinions and about creative or the talent or whatever, but he did not often really get an idea that he really wanted to see implemented. In other words, he didn't stick his hand in too much into creative, but he wanted a mummy. And I was like, I loved the Mummy when I was a kid, but that was 20 years ago, and I'm not sure, but, well, it might work. Well, how? And obviously mummies don't speak, according to all the movies I've seen, and those are pretty accurate. So I said, well, in this case, he's got to have a manager. And I thought, who's the only weird, twisted, loquacious, heat-getting individual that can also potentially carry off the realistic managing of a 3,000-year-old mummy?
I've actually just seen a picture of this mummy. Seth Manhammer had put it up because he's obviously working on those tapes for you. And what a sight.
Yeah, well, Alice, the thing with the mummy, as I recall, the outfit consisted of a full head zombie mask first. And at first, when he first got there, we put like a white sweatsuit on him, white sweatshirt and sweatpants, and white sneakers and white gloves, which were blindingly white. So then we have to wrap him in gauze and tape and all this shit. And the first time he went out, I think it was Thanksgiving Thunder, he went out, and Jim, you could explain what was going on here better than I can. It's some kind of technical glitch, but when something too white is on the screen, it goes kind of like that, and it burns. So,
he was bleeding across the screen on those old 3/4-inch tapes because he was so white, so we had to dirty him up even more. And you'd touch him, Alice, and you'd press on him. We put baby powder on him, so when Tim Horner hit him, dust would rise off of him. But
that's what I noticed. He looked a lot like Pigpen in the sense that he just seemed to be surrounded by a cloud.
So we would have to roll him around in the dirt, in those armories or whatever. We'd take him out in the back of the middle school or wherever we were and roll him around in the dirt. And he'd keep getting cut.
Also, you
cut
remember
him out of the outfit. What?
Yeah, well, also we taped him up first. You weren't even there the first night we taped him up because we just got kind of a gauge on it and then cut him out of it so that he could put it back on. But every time you added that uniform back on, you had to tape more to make it look seamless. So as a result, as the more it went on, it started getting thicker and thicker, and we'd add
stinkier and stinkier because he couldn't wash it. And do you remember that he was claustrophobic?
Yes. Right,
he's totally enclosed in this mask that he can't see out of, that's tight around his head, and he'd be out there panicking. He'd get to the back, get me out of this fucking thing. I was like, what's wrong? I'm claustrophobic. I'm like, well, you picked a hell of a gimmick.
and he was great because he was a friend of Brian Hildebrand's, and Brian had recommended him, and he was a great kid. He was like 6'7", 6'8", and 300 something pounds, but he was claustrophobic. And then after we had taped him and dirtied him and powdered him over the course of a couple of months worth, then remember we did the deal on TV in Johnson City where you cut his finger off with a pair of scissors.
Oh, yeah. That was actually the first time I got in a pro wrestling magazine off of that. That was a milestone.
He looked already like he was coming apart when he would walk down the aisle and all the dirt, and he'd be shedding the powder and everything, and tape would be randomly falling off. So then we have him on the interview where you say, for all you doubters, you could probably do it better, but tell the people what you did and how we worked it.
Well, he was going to fight the Dirty White Boy, as I recall, and I was doing a Down and Dirty with Dutch, which was Dutch Mantel's weekly in-ring interview segment. And so I went up there. What we did was we had taken his dirty little glove, and we had him fold his thumb back, like he was doing the Four Horsemen sign. And then we filled the glove with sand and poured sand into the finger, or into the thumb portion of the glove. So he had this tumor on the bottom of his hand and a strange floppy finger. So I was out there talking about how I'd prepared Prince Karras for his match against the Dirty White Boy, and he was going to win the belt or whatever. I think Dirty White Boy had the belt at the time. And I said that you directed me to say that I had brought some of his native soil, the sand of the Nile, and I went into after whatever other filth I had inserted in there about blowjobs and monostat or whatever the hell I talked about. I started screaming, "Now watch this, you crackers! Watch this if you don't believe he's a real mummy!" And I took the scissors and cut the thumb, and then he took the hand and turned it as sand poured out onto that.
Let's make sure we clearly get this guy's name, because obviously he was a fucking sport. All the shit you put this guy through.
Rob Mazie was his name, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
His name was Rob Mazie from Pittsburgh, and I gotta. It might have been the first amputation actually performed on a wrestling program where somebody actually got an appendage amputated. But the thing is, I have to think people at least gave us some bit of credit for trying, because what we were doing was we were having, just so everybody doesn't think I completely lost my mind, the announcers were saying their story on behalf of the promotion was that this Daryl Van Horn is obviously some kind of sick, twisted individual, and he's found this Prince Karras, who he claims is a 3,000-year-old mummy. And of course, that's just completely ludicrous. But the guy is so big and so strong, and he's got him wrapped up there. He needs to be inspected. There's almost no way the opponents can hurt him. And so then he trims his finger off, and Bob Caudle was like gulping, like, "Oh my God."
Bob Caudle, always the penultimate straight man.
And that's the best thing, because you had he was an aide to Senator Jesse Helms, the most conservative senator in the world, for 20 years. And on the weekend, he was watching a disgustingly perverted karaoke singer amputate a 3,000-year-old mummy's finger.
Yeah, well, you know what I didn't realize he worked for Helms at the time until much later. And I would go out there and, like a dumb fuck, because actually at one point you came to me and you said, "Look, this angle's an abortion, so just go out there and get your shit over. Get the match over, but get your shit in there too." So my shit was, whatever my social, whatever was going on in my mind at the time.
Well,
apparently blowjobs and yeast infections, from what you mentioned earlier.
He would raise Prince Karras on his entrance. We'd play the old Universal horror movie music, and he would evoke an incantation in the ring on the microphone that would raise Prince Karras and bring him to the ring. But his invocation was usually all kinds of filthy, disgusting words in Carney, so that nobody would know. But we set the kiss and
yeah, and funnily, the one Prince Karras match that aired on the WWE network, I guess somebody figured that out because they edited out my invocation.
Oh, that would have been great. A yeast infection. We set kiss and
yeah, it was.
Hey,
but, on the Bob Caudle thing, I'm sitting there going off about how Jesus is bullshit every week, one way or another. I was getting my atheist jabs in there, which I look back at it now, and of course, I was, on one level, it's everything not to do if you're trying to get something over, and another way, it's kind of like Dada art or something. It kind of exists as a performance piece. But I'd be saying all this horrible shit about religion, and Bob Caudle would be sitting there wincing. I don't remember what I said right now. But, I mean, it was pretty heavy-duty shit to be saying on TV in that neck of the woods, and probably on TV, period, at that time. And after I was...
In all fairness, it wasn't like you were just coming out and saying, I'm an atheist and God sucks or whatever, but you were throwing this shit in the context that we had given you of this international traveler who had gone to Egypt and studied mysticism and all this shit. And in that way, it was that's why it didn't get any heat except with a guy like Bob who actually knew what you were talking about, because nobody watched it. Remember the one time you did the promo for WYMT, your mountain television in Hazard, Kentucky, channel 57 on your dial, folks. And it was going to be the Thanksgiving Thunder, probably in Barberville, Kentucky, or maybe the one in Hazard we did, or whatever. But anyway, you came out and said, I want all of you Eastern Kentucky fans, after you have finished the traditional Thanksgiving felching of the family dog, to listen to what I have to say. And well, I went up to you afterwards. I said, what does felching the family dog mean? And when you explained...
You didn't know what felching meant?
Well, it was
innocent Jim.
I'm sorry. But when he told me, I said, you know what? If I didn't know, then I bet you nobody that's going to complain is going to know either. And we left it in and nobody complained.
That's the best kind of subversion, where you can slip things in and people don't know. It's like subliminal messages. I like it.
Well, the funny thing with that was Tim Horner came to me right before that first match at Thanksgiving Thunder, and he said, Van Horn, he goes, man, you cut some great promos, man. He goes, but these people don't know what you're talking about. And he goes, so how about instead of whatever you're going to say, he goes, how about you just tell them they're dumber than a bucket of coal? And he was actually right, because as I'm babbling on all this shit, I finally said, Tim Horner, you're dumber than a bucket of coal. Then we got a pop, I think. They understood. But that was the last time I remember performing for a wrestling audience that believed. It was a different kind of heat. And when they got mad, they got really mad. They wanted to kill you. No, I didn't have that problem, but you guys did. It
was, I guess, Smoky Mountain was the last. I mean, Memphis. You didn't work Memphis in the late '90s, but Smoky Mountain and Memphis were the last two traditional wrestling territories where you had real fans going to the matches, and I say real fan. You know what I mean? Actual wrestling fans that weren't smart, didn't want to be smart, didn't read anything, didn't have an internet, and just went to see the matches based on what you did on television and what the card was. And so the reactions were completely different than anything you see today.
I have a question real quick. Would it be possible to run a similar kind of promotion now, in the sense that would you find those same people in those same locations if you went to Eastern Kentucky?
Those people don't, there wasn't enough of them for me 20 years ago. So it's definitely not enough of them now. But I'll tell you, just off on a tangent, we'll get back to Devil's Story. But at a Ring of Honor show in Norfolk, Virginia, 3 years ago, which would have been 2012. 2011, let's say 4 years ago now. I was there, and we were in the Norfolk Scope that Crockett had run for so many years, and before that, he ran the place that we were in, which was basically the garage. And one of the door guards had been there for 30 years or more. And me and Delirious were talking to him, and he was like, yeah, and I remember, boy, down at I can't remember, the boathouse or the lighthouse or whatever the bar was in town at Virginia Beach where all the guys would go after the scope. I remember when Wahoo McDaniel went in there one night and somebody started something and he beat that guy and there was blood on the floors. And I remember they took him to jail, and I remember him and Johnny Valentine beating the shit out of each other in the ring. And oh my God, there was blood. It's so bar fight, and in the ring, it was the same kind of thing. He said, but you know what? I kind of, now thinking back on it, I remember seeing a few people as they'd walk by into the locker room, they'd give each other a glance, and they were supposed to be mad at each other, but it kind of looked like they were on the same wavelength, because just last year I saw a documentary on television, and they explained that wrestling was all kind of put up. Here in 2010, he saw a documentary. So this guy believed for all of his life, and then Johnny Valentine and Wahoo McDaniel made believers out of him. And then he saw a documentary, but that was 5 years ago, that he just now. So we've pretty much smartened everybody in the country up that's not hooked up to a ventilator that this is all horseshit. So you will never find those people again.
Yeah, you can't. I don't think you can recapture that anymore. But being there, Jim, it was the first time I was around everybody from the top to the bottom of the card. They knew what the fuck they were doing, I'd had worked, you'd work indies where you might have Wahoo and Manny Fernandez or Ivan Koloff on top, but then it was just all the indie guys. If it was like a Greg Price show or something, all the underneath guys were like Crockett jobbers. So, you'd have whoever.
Good fundamentals, but they'd never been in a money spot.
Right, but at least everybody was pretty good. But in your program, it was just a whole different group. So it was my first time, because I really had to unlearn all the social faux pas that I had made in outlaw wrestling. One of the first nights I was in there, there's a little amusing anecdote. I'd ridden up with Jeff, and I was a big beer drinker, and he was a big pot smoker. So we're in Morristown or Knoxville, wherever the Super 8 was. I don't remember. So we're in there and sitting around going, well, hey, where are the rats? So we're hanging out the hallway looking for rats. So these two chunky chicks come walking up, and we get to shooting the shit. And Jeff's like, hey, would you like to smoke some of my fancy tennis leaves? And I'm like, hey, we've got beer. And she shows us, in the middle of the hallway, pulls down her pants, and she has Prime Time tattooed on her, shall we say, mound of Venus. Right? So we're like, wow, come on in, ladies. This should be fun. So we hang out, and they leave. A little while later, there's a big banging at the door. Jeff goes and looks through the peephole. He goes, holy shit, it's Brian Lee. And I'm like, oh no, what have we done? So Brian Lee comes busting in, and he's like, what you boys doing in here? Smells like Cheech and Chong took a shit in here. What the hell is this? What beer? You got any girls in here? And he's going around, he's pulling back the shower curtain, and he's lifted up the mattresses and shit. He's like, you had girls in here, didn't you? Now, I'm thinking he's wanting to beat our ass for having the girl with the Primetime tattooed on her.
Because as everyone knows, that was his gimmick, Primetime Brian Lee.
Yeah. So then he goes, who paid for this shit? And we're like, yeah, we did. You paid for all them beers? And you paid for that? You paid for that rojo, that shit over there in the ashtray? Yeah, we did. So, boys, let me tell you something. If you're going to be around this business and you're going to be in Smoky Mountain, you don't be honeymooning any goddamn rats. And he goes, I'm going to tell you something. You don't give up the dick to those bitches until they buy you something. You understand me? He goes, you see these boots? These are $350 Harley Davidson boots. They still got the tag on them like Minnie Pearl. That bitch bought them for me. You think I gave her the dick? Hell no. Who do you think paid for my room? She did. I still ain't giving up the dick till I get some more money out of her. So unless you want to be dragged off to wrestling court, you're good to wrestler's court. Don't you ever honeymoon the rats. And so then he stormed out, and I was like, man, I think I'm going to like this place. my kind of town.
Hey, and also you used to ride up from Columbia with Chris Canyon.
Yeah. Well, the way I lured, we had met and become friends, and I'd taken him under my wing. Now, the reality, I would have gotten him up there anyway. But I think the first time I mentioned to him, hey, my car is a piece of shit. And, I've got to go to Barberville, Kentucky, or where, I don't remember where the first, but all the rides were long-ass rides for me. So I think at first he didn't want to do it, or he didn't want to just drive. He said, I'm not going to waste, a day of 2 days of my life or whatever if I'm not going to be on the card. So I said to him, well, they haven't cast the mummy yet. So Cornette wants to look at you and see if you'd be a good mummy because you're a tall guy.
You told him that
Yes. So then he was all gung-ho. And then I called you and I said, hey, man, I need a ride, and can you get him booked? Can he do some jobs for you or something so I can justify my ride to Kentucky? And you did, and that was his first TV,
And you could tell right off the bat, I liked his work, and he knew what he was doing, kind of. He was green and still hadn't filled out his paws yet.
Right.
But he did a great job, and that gave you a ride.
And again, it gave me a ride, and it gave him a tape, to show around. Hey, he'd finally been on TV. And, there's just a million stories between me and Canyon, he eventually did go crazy. But he was a fun guy to be around.
He was a great guy, and he helped us out tremendously here in OVW, too. When he was still on the main roster up there, he had been here before rehabbing an injury or whatever and gone back, but he would ask to come down and work 2 or 3 week program on TV with somebody like Johnny Jeter or somebody, and he was really into teaching and training, and he just worked his ass off, and his matches were fantastic on our show. So I, really appreciated that. And that was, who would have thought, once again, as Ricky Morton used to say, you better be careful the toes you step on the way up may be connected to the ass you got to kiss on the way down. 10 years before that, I was booking him so he could give you a ride, and then he's a big star and comes back down and works programs with my guys to pay it off. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Well, he's the one who got me into WCW after that, because after you fired me for being a dipshit and pissing you off.
Actually, I was going to ask that before we get to WCW. Is it true that after you were fired, you drunk dialed a bunch of people on the production crew?
No, that was before
that is the
fired.
rumor.
That's how I got fired. I drunk dialed.
I swear right now, and I guess maybe off air, I should ask you about this, because I am writing the Smoky Mountain book, but I can't remember what those, and you don't have to say here on the program, we can just tease the people, but I can't remember what you did to make me fire you. And maybe you want to leave it that way.
Basically, let's say for on air, we will say this, and off air, I'll give you the full story. Somebody with whom you had a rather contentious relationship over the years called me. So I'm like, holy shit, this guy's calling me. What could this guy be calling me for? And he said, is it true that, he said, I heard that Smoky Mountain's going out of business. And because
I'm starting to remember
issues, which I won't go into. But so like a dumbass, I think I had just gotten fired from my day job, and my mother got lymphatic cancer, so I'm in the middle of a big drunk. And now I'm thinking I'm going to lose the only fucking thing I've got left. Now, again, because I still was learning the ways of, at the very least, wrestling etiquette, if not social etiquette still at that point, I took it upon myself to call, I think it was Casey O'Connor, and then who was your assistant in the office? Pam somebody, maybe? I don't remember.
Pam, yes. Pam Lawson.
I called the first guy, And I said, is this true, man? I was just like a panic attack. And he basically told me, if I were you, I'd shut up and mind your own fucking business. That has nothing to do with you. So what did I do? I hung up and called Pam Awesome, who then made the promo a little more intense. And about 45 minutes later, I'm sitting at home, and I get, Daryl Van Horn, hey, Jim Cornette, what goddamn business is it of yours if I've got this and that and this and that, and you stupid son of a bitch, and you went on. I'm sitting there going, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do anything. Man, you gave me my break. And I don't give a shit about that, you stupid fucker. And you're like, you know what? More people have seen you now than did before, so at least that's it. And blah, 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 you stupid son of a bitch. If I see you, I'm going to fucking break your neck and all this shit. So then I'm like, boy, I really
that's right, because what you stumbled into was the goofy fucker whose name we shall not mention had printed that Smoky Mountain Wrestling was going out of business because he was mad at me at some things that I'd done, said about his friends or whatever the fuck. So he decided I'll fuck with him. This was the start of that contentious relationship that, well, he doesn't exist.
Actually, I think you have the wrong guy. Think a little deeper.
It wasn't the guy who printed that we were going out of business?
Nope. Somebody who once tapped you on the shoulder and said that somebody said, watch out for the racket. If that rings a bell.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it had the same goddamn effect because this was at the time where that other person had printed that we were going out of business, and the son of a television station manager in Virginia in a market that we really wanted to be in, that we had pitched the show to, had subscribed to that publication that guy wrote and said that, and called Sandy Scott and declined because, well, my son hears you're going out of business. And that's so and by the way, this was not when we were going out of business. As you remember, you left, it was a fucking little more than a year later, but still.
Yeah, it was about a year.
But that was when I was in the middle of hearing all this going out of business shit, and it was causing us problems, and I was fucking pissed. And there you go.
Oh yeah, and you were catching up. I remember there was you were at war with the torch, whatever. So there was you were kind of wound up back then. But like
yes, I wound up.
But I will say this, just in case anybody thinks that Mr. Cornette just kicked me in the nuts and threw me to the curb. You did actually call me back several months later and said, look, I've got an idea for you. Can't tell you what it is right now, but I'd be interested in bringing you back in, but everybody knows you were a dipshit and pissed me off, so I can't exactly just say, here he is, so we're just going to have to wait on this a little bit. And then I think that was that might have been towards the time right before you went out of business.
Yeah, that was what do I do when I'm about to go out of business? Fuck, I'll call Van Horn.
Sure. He'll drive up for nothing.
But you landed on your feet eventually. With where did you work for Paul next, or where did you go next?
No. Canyon had been in WCW for a couple of years at that point, working as a straight jobber, and then he had some goofy bottom of the card tag team called Men at Work with I can't remember Tom Winter. I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, Bischoff in his infinite wisdom decided that he wanted to compete with Vince McMahon in having these crazy over-the-top characters, and his market research had dictated, as I recall the story being relayed to me, that video games were the wave of the future, which I guess he was right on that point. So he hired this special effects firm to come up with a complete knockoff of the Mortal Kombat video game. So Glacier, who I guess... They had Glacier, who was a knockoff of Sub-Zero in that game. I don't know shit about video games.
I ain't any help to you either on this one.
I hate them. And then Mortis was a knockoff of Skeletor or something like that. I forget the name. So they spent all this money on all this production shit, and they had these guys. And, look, Canyon was green. Glacier was green. They had them in the power plant rehearsing and taking karate lessons and stuff like that, but to be karate guys. Well,
oh God!
First of all, the gimmick's goofy, and I had heard that they actually like contacted Humperdinck because they knew these guys needed a mouthpiece. I mean, Canyon had a speech impediment, and Glacier wasn't. Well, he was a babyface, so he was going to have to talk anyway. But Canyon couldn't talk, at least at that point. So they needed a manager, and it was, from what I heard, Humperdinck and somebody else said, "I'm not getting involved in that goofy shit." So Canyon, and at Canyon's house one night, and at this point, I had actually gotten to that point. I mean, for a couple years, I was being that pain in the ass, saying, "Hey, man, show my tape to Sullivan," that kind of stuff, and nothing, and I eventually said, "Okay, I'm done with wrestling. Life's moved on." So I'm just visiting him, and we're sitting around with all the boys getting liquored up one night, and about midnight, we get a phone call from Dallas Page, and he goes, "Canyon, yo, get that manager guy, your friend of yours, to make a tape for me." And so then I was like, "Oh, when do you need it?" Well, he didn't talk to me. He talked to Canyon. He told Canyon I wanted here at 9 o'clock in the morning. So it's like midnight, and we're drunk. I think Disco was over there. It might have been me, Disco, and Canyon. So I'm totally shit-faced, and I just go into this, whatever. I made up a story, and there was no backstory to these characters at all. So I sat down and I tried to... Say what?
They just appear. They just show up.
Yeah, they just appeared. So I said, as I've done my entire fucking career, I've got to try to make sense of something that makes no sense. So and the one thing I knew we were told was that they were fighting over this fucking ancient fiberglass helmet of Glacier's. So I came up with a backstory that they were pit fighters from Taipei, and with all this kind of gaga like that, like based on a Bloodsport movie, that kind of shit. And then I cribbed from the Daryl Van Horn character, and that I was a collector of human oddities and all this kind of shit, and these were my oddities or something. So I bring this tape to Dallas Page next morning. He looks at it, he says, "This sucks. It's horrible." I go, "Okay, well, what are we supposed to?" He goes, "Well, your ideas are good. And see, he was also their babysitter. He had been assigned to kind of overlook them while they were training and stuff. He said, "Your idea is great, but your delivery is shit. It's just horrible. You're talking too fast and all that, and plus you're drunk." So he had me go and do this.
That might have something to do with it.
Yeah, it probably did. So he has me do this painstakingly slow promo. He's the first guy who ever, quote unquote, produced me. And he has me, he's like, look down your nose at them like a vampire. And he's like, and start speaking real slow. And, he's giving me these real heavy duty directions. So I do it to his satisfaction. And he says, "Okay, I'll go take it over to Bischoff's house." And they were next door neighbors at the time. He's gone for about a half hour, and he comes walking through the door. I'm sitting on the couch in Page's den or whatever, and he throws the tape at me. He goes, "Well, if I were you," I forget what he said. He goes, "You might want to send it to Memphis," or either he said, "Give up the dream," some shit like that. He said, "You might want to send it somewhere else." And I'm totally crestfallen at this point, right? I'm like, God damn it, I'm actually in Dallas Page's house. This is as close as I'm ever going to get to the dream. And he just told me I'm fucked. And I'm about to fucking cry. I'm like, oh my God. And then he goes, "Oh, by the way, kid, you got the job." And then I did cry. I ran in the bathroom and started crying.
Oh my God.
It was ridiculous. And I'm like, what? I got just a big burst of emotion. So I come out with my eyes all dried out, and he said Bischoff loved the tape and loved everything. So I go to have my meeting with Bischoff to sign the contract. So, I'm now coming up in the world a little bit. Now, at this point, I'm still living in Columbia, but I'm still driving a piece of shit car. I'm living on people's couches and shit like that. So he signs me to a nice deal. At least for me, it was like, holy shit, I make the kind of money somebody's dad makes now, And but as he signs it, he says, "Look," and the NWO had already come in by that point. He said, "Look, this gimmick's dead. Don't buy a house. Don't get married. Don't have any kids, because it's not going to last." But and he said, I'm going to tell you now, I am going to make it my mission to get rid of tag teams and managers. They're passé. But let's do the best we can with what we got.
What a motivator! What a way to motivate people.
Exactly. So, so then that gimmick was what it was. It was, and then, Canyon, rest his soul, was agitating Kevin Sullivan constantly. Always there was like stupid high school politics going on because there were Sullivan guys and then we were Page guys, and you know what I mean. So it was a nice featured spot, a great featured spot. It was like top of the mid, maybe, or middle of the mid, maybe, but with great production values.
You were top of the bill on a Titanic.
Yes, exactly. So that last, I was there for about. He signed me to a 2-year deal, and I did about 1 year straight, and then he went to Canyon. Bischoff did, because Raven had already gotten in Bischoff's ear and said, "Fuck this Mortis stuff. I want him to work a program with me." So Bischoff went to him and said, "Look, your manager's a nice guy, doesn't cause any shit, he's got talent, but, he does evil, and that's all he does." So not that anybody had ever asked me to do otherwise, but he said...
and you were so good at evil.
Well, yeah, one-trick pony. But he said, we're going to send him home. So he let me... my contract ran another year, and then I got like the old Iron Sheik deal where when it was supposed to run out, nobody did anything about it. So
no!
For another year and a half.
Why did I never get these deals? Nobody could ever forget about me.
Yeah, so I got the benefit of mailbox money, and of course, contrary to what Bischoff had told me to do at that point, I went out and got married, got a house, and sat there thinking this money was going to keep coming forever at that point, and got used to that nice FedEx every week or two. I forget when they used to deliver them. But, I just sat on the sidelines. They brought me in once or twice, maybe for about a month. They had me do an opinion editorial segment called The Auditorium, which sucked. Because at that point, I was completely... Here's the thing. They would be in my ear. Whoever was producing me would tell me, do it in that evil voice. So I was supposed to be talking about, like what you used to do when you cut that promo on the NWO.
Yeah.
Deal back then. That was the gist of what it was supposed to be, was just, talking about what was going on in the politics or whatever, whatever.
But you were doing it as
I'm doing it as Vincent Price.
Yeah. The Thriller.
Yeah, so that sucked. I mean, that shit's shown up on YouTube, and it makes me want to crawl into a fetal position when I see it. But I was just going along with what they wanted me to do. So they canned that. I sat home for a while, and then eventually... And I will say this, Bischoff didn't fire me. I think, who took over? Bill Bush, I think, took over. Now, they're bleeding money at that point, because this is like late 1999 or so. And then my childhood hero, J.J. Dillon, called me up and said, well, I've got some bad news. and that brought us to the next phase of life.
And that was when you went to work for Paul.
Yes. I got a call from Raven in the middle of the night saying, hey, Mike Awesome's manager sucks. Now, see, I'd never watched ECW other than out the corner of my eye if I was at somebody's house. I didn't like it. I didn't understand it. It was a complete, obviously you could tell there was a great deal of energy and, a lot of stuff going on, but it wasn't the kind of wrestling I grew up on at all. So the story was that he wanted to get rid of Mike Awesome's manager and bring me in. So through some confluence of events, Paul never calls me about this. And I'm reading about it in the fucking sheets. And I'm wondering, what do they pay you, like 90 days after your contract is over or something at WCW? So I had like another 90 days to get paid.
Right.
And I'm thinking, this is starting to run out. Well, Raven said, you need to get off your ass and fly yourself into the shows. I said, what, $500-$600 plane tickets every week? And not get paid and not get a spot. And he said, no, you need to get off your ass and show up. You can't. This isn't a place where you just get hired. You have to show that you're one of the boys. The boys are going to have to embrace you and like you. And if you act like an asshole, you're not going to get a job. You know, it's a different kind of environment. He's not just going to hire somebody and throw him out there. So I did that for about 2 or 3 months. I was, you know, like the asshole backstage with his bags ready to go. You know? Heyman never spoke to me. Never, you know. And at this point, and eventually I got this, towards the end, after like 3 months.
But now you're there all the time, and you are a talent that has been on a big-time television over the past couple of years, and he doesn't even speak to you to say, we don't have anything right now or whatever?
Oh, no, he was, I will say this, he was busy, and you know me, you know, despite what I act like on TV, I'm a fucking pussy. I don't like conflict and problems and shit, so I'm just being polite and waiting for the opportunity to go shake his hand. So actually, it wasn't 3 months. That's not true. It was maybe 3-4 weeks before he actually said hello to me.
But you were lurking around, yeah, waiting for the chance.
So then he throws me, Steve Carino and Jack Victory are in the middle of some goofy skit backstage, and Heyman goes, "Hey, Vandenberg, get over here. I got an idea." And he has me walk over there and do, what do you call it, the last rites over Steve Carino's body while they're doing this ha-ha shit. And he had me say something like I was doing the last rites but speaking Yiddish. You know? So I do that. And then they go running off, and he has me pull out a cigarette, light it up. And I had a clerical collar on. I was wearing the Vandenberg suit, but I was wearing a white priest collar at the time. And I threw that off and said something like, "This gig sucks," lit up a cigarette, and I said, "But it beats managing Mortis and Wrath," and walked off. So that was my CW debut. So at that point, now I'm on TV, but he didn't pay me for it. And then I continued to come for another couple months. And I think he put me in one other skit with Don Callis, the same kind of thing. Basically, I was doing Jewish jokes. You know? And he had to teach me how to say L'chaim and shit like that so I could get it out right. So I came around for another couple months, and finally they were down, I think, in Tallahassee or somewhere, Jacksonville, I don't know. And I was like, I can't afford to do this shit anymore. You know, it's time to give up the dream and go get a real job. And I was sticking the key in my car with a tear in my eye, like, bye-bye, wrestling, it's over. And I hear, "Send in balls." I'm like, "What?" And it's Heyman. And he says, "Get in here, I got an idea." And so he started this thing that was aborted, but I was supposed to be involved as a manager of Raven, which quickly devolved into some crazy shit with Mikey Whipwreck. And I came back, so we did a skit like that, or a skit or two. And I was out with Raven one day, and he said, "Vandy," he said, "I'm going to tell you this." He goes, "As a talker, you're like a 9 or an 8 on a scale of 10. And he said, "But you have no gimmick." He said, "You look like Todd Gordon." And he goes, you gotta make people look at you when you go through the airport and all that shit." So I just went back home for a couple weeks, thought about it, and the next time I showed up, I had gone to the pimp store, bought the red suit because I stole that idea from Richard Pryor, Live on the Sunset Strip movie or whatever it was called, which I was always a big Richard Pryor fan anyway. Took the red suit, having always been, you know, a mark for the devil since childhood, cultivated some certain things, stole the eyebrows, not from the devil, but from the Punisher on Spider-Man issue number 129 when he did it. I just took all my geeky shit and put it together. And when I showed up, Paul popped huge, you know. But from that point forward, it was weird in there. It was like landing on a different planet. The gravity was different. The atmosphere was different. There were no rules. So I go out there trying to be a heel manager. You couldn't do that. Didn't work. Philly people shit all over you. But we'd get drunk in the middle of the night, and Paul would just tell us to do these dumb vignettes. And the dumb vignette, I think he was doing it as a rib on the hardcore fans because there was nothing hardcore about what we did. You know, it was just a bunch of goofy bullshit with visual puns that would end in gales of Cesar Romero Joker laughter. You know, but it became fucking huge baby faces. And they put us with Tajiri. And, you know, I mean, in terms, it's the most fun I probably ever had on a consistent basis. But it was a great camaraderie and whatnot. But, all rules of wrestling were thrown out. I told Tommy Dreamer one time, I said, how in the fuck am I supposed to cheat? I said, the referee lets people bring in chairs and chainsaws, whatever the hell they're doing. I'm like, you can't get heat. And, I was like, the only way to get heat is to be a baby face.
Yeah, the only way to get heat is to follow the rules. And that will get you booed out of the building.
So, I had to adapt to that and had a lot of fun. And he paid me very well, too. So, I had and then they went out of business.
Mitchell strikes again. Another one folds up.
Yeah. So now I'm sitting there with my shillelagh in my hand, going, "What am I going to do?"
So the latest promotion that you've pretty much killed. Although you really can't claim the credit for that one. There's a lot of people much better than you at the art of killing wrestling promotions that have had a hand in that. But you were on the sidelines for a while, and then TNA happened.
Yeah, that's when I started doing the karaoke thing, which again, now I'm because I'd actually been in the business and been around real wrestlers and learned psychology and shit. I'm actually now really applying this shit at work. And instead of being a dumb fuck karaoke host, who just does the same shit they do, I realized, what I want to do what wrestlers do? I want to draw money. So my job and my approach to everything, all these karaoke hosts around here hate me. They don't understand what I do. But the bar owners love me because I make them money, because I go out there and pitch shit like Dusty pitching the Omni, and that's my job. I don't give it. I mean, my voice is shit. Sometimes I can sing, sometimes I can't. But I've got good charisma, and I can cut a promo, and everything is geared to get your ass over there to that bar and buy this and this and this, and this is on sale, and this is, I make it sound, like I'm pitching Madison Square Garden. So I built that up, and I was done with wrestling. Then I get a call, I think about a year later, from, I don't remember if it was Jeremy Borash or Bert Prentice. Somebody called me. I said, hey, we want you to – oh, no, first Jeff Jarrett called me, and he said he wanted me to manage Lenny and Lodi and wanted to know if I would play a gay character. Like,
you would be the most unattractive homosexual man I think I've ever seen.
Yes, I believe they call them bears, as Canyon used to tell me. I said, well, Jeff, it has nothing to do with gay. I said, but my gimmick, I can't imagine, the way and by that point, I had been on TV enough and, I had the devil look and shit. So I was making money and still do off of, my appearance to this day is unique. So I make money off of that. It makes people watch and pay attention and shit. So I was like, I'm not changing my face because I'm making six figures over here drinking beer and looking at tits 3 hours a day, 5 minutes from my house. So, I'm not really interested. And then they called back with this idea for the new church. And I went in there, and I had never been given a script before in my life. Now, I went in, I don't know who wrote the stuff, but it was horrible, And my heart wasn't into it. So the first few in and outs I had with TNA, I was just truly phoning it in. I was like, oh, this is how people do it. They do scripts. And then I'd look at it, and I couldn't stand it. I felt I was being lazy. And, I'd worked all my life and dreamed all my life to have this opportunity to be on national TV and wrestling. And here I am acting like the lazy fuckers from the NWO that I used to grumble about when a few years earlier in WCW. So I started just saying, fuck it, give me bullet points, and took off from there. So if there's anything you want to ask about TNA in specific, let me know.
Well, actually, when I got there for my short stint, that's when you were with Abyss, and I thought you guys were good together. I thought once again, they tried to make his backstory, I wonder who that was, tried to make his backstory so convoluted, and the mother and the father and who was his father, and we don't know. But Abyss was a great monster, and by the nature of his gimmick, he couldn't or shouldn't talk, and nothing has disproved that since then to me. And,
Right.
and you were great because you looked like you would manage a freak like Abyss.
Well, thank you.
So I thought that was a good package, but the problem and I love Abyss to death as a person, and what a talent he was, a guy that can move around at that size and everything, but he would not just stop doing shit. And to the point where
me and him had that argument. We fought like cats and dogs because my point to him, and I'm just like you, I love the guy, but I would tell him, look, I'm out here doing promos for you. I don't talk about myself at all, which you later told me I needed to start doing a little bit. But I said, look, you're like Wile E. Coyote. I said, the first time you threw down those tacks, it was great. Everybody popped. I said, but then it got to where every time there was a pay-per-view, it ended with him pouring out the tacks. Everybody would go, wow. And then somehow you'd trip over your own dick and wind up in the tacks and lose.
In your own tacks. In your own tacks.
Yeah, in your own tacks. And I'm like, if you did that one time a year or once every 2 years, they could run that on a highlight reel. But his thing was he was like a mark for Mick Foley. And Mick Foley fell off that fucking cage at Hell in a Cell and nearly killed himself. That was great. But you know what? I guarantee you Foley wouldn't be doing that shit again. And he damn sure wouldn't do it every week.
The problem, poor Abyss, I told him one time, every match he ended up covered in blood from every orifice of his body with thumbtacks sticking in him or possibly even broken glass or tied up in some barbed wire or falling off a high structure or going through furniture. And finally it was to the point where Dutch and Jeff
said... a collective yawn.
Yeah. And Dutch and Jeff said, we got to, they loved him as a person and as a talent. They said, we just have to give him a rest because, everything in the world has been done to him. So they leave him off 6 months and they bring him back. And like the first or second pay-per-view after they brought him back after being off TV for 6 months, he was thrown off the stage through a table while the table was on fire.
Yep.
And I just looked at him, and he'd come up to you with the thumbtack sticking all in him still from the match. And he would say, well, how was it? And I would say, just go take the fucking thumbtacks out of yourself first for me.
Right.
But
let me ask you this, Jim.
He couldn't be edited. He couldn't be. And Russo egged it on, by the way, like all fucking jock sniffers do. Poor guy to fracture himself. But anyway.
Let me ask you this about him. I want to interrupt you a second. And this is a question that has eluded me from the day I first managed him. Dutch and Jeff know what they're doing. They grew up in this shit. And, why would they? Because I'll tell you what, if I were the guy running the program, I would have pulled a Bill Watts or an Ole Anderson. And I would have said, the next time you do that crazy fucking thumbtack, whatever bullshit, I'm going to fire your ass. That's it. Don't do it because you're not a monster. If you're watching Friday the 13th, does Jason chase after you and then cut his arm off by accident, or does Freddy Krueger cut his own nose off with his damn gimmick? And maybe they started doing that later, which is why those things quit drawing money themselves. But
well, the answer
scary about it. Why wouldn't they have told him? I'm just thinking they had to have known. Look, this is diminishing the monster. We need to tell him not to do that. Why wouldn't they have?
I watched Dutch do it and say it. Don't know what Jeff was saying. Also, Abyss is one of those guys, you like him so much, and he gets so enthusiastic about stuff. You want to let him do stuff. So I don't know. I can't answer your question. I do know that it was brought up to him a number of times. I don't know why the foot wasn't put down. But to be honest with you, especially when they did the deal where, and I think this was after you guys had split up, and here comes Judas Messias, yeah. Messias under the ring and with the broken glass, and he's blading his arm. I told Dutch that night that if Spike TV actually paid attention to that program, if I'd have been the guy running Spike TV, I'd have fucking canceled the thing and would say, why is this shit on my air? And it got over so horribly live because, well, it was a combination of they knew that the guy wasn't really taking broken glass and slicing Abyss's arms up. They knew that because they're all smart to wrestling and they're in an amusement park. And that's another thing. If I'd have been Universal Studios, an amusement park, fun for the whole family. Here's a guy ripping a guy to shreds with broken glass. You're out of here. Here's your rent back. That's what I would have said. But also, the fans just sat there and looked at it because they were disgusted, because they knew he wasn't really using broken glass. But at the same time, you could see that this guy's arms really were ripped wide open and bleeding for real. So it was just distasteful and just horse shit. And that was another of the things, along with the infamous where they started the fire the guy chant with Sting and Abyss in the last rites match, and all that corny hokey shit and that ultra violent shit and all that stupid shit they were doing that buried Abyss, buried the company. But nobody has any restraint in the business anymore. And this, I'm telling, and you're agreeing with me, a guy who used to do, profanity and carny for the Eastern Kentucky audience. But still. Yeah, I digress. But I don't know why. I can't answer your question why that they would do any of that stuff.
The thing that pissed me off when they fired me, because, and again, I love Abyss and that shit talking him, but he had completely killed his own gimmick off, and I had not killed my gimmick off. Regardless of the convoluted bullshit I was given, you can go back and, look, everything was static. The ratings were always the same. So if nothing else, the best you could pull out of this is a decent review,
It's best you can hope for is a draw.
Right. So it was constantly, this is stupid. This makes no sense. But for the 2 minutes that Jim Mitchell was talking about this shit, I actually forgot about it and got engrossed. So I was thinking okay, maybe they're going to send him off and repackage him. But, I should be pretty safe, because I'll tell you, Jim, they almost, in terms of, at least to my face back there, they almost genuflected around me. They were
That's a word that has not been used on the program until now.
For those who don't know, that is a Catholic thing of bowing and submission and whatnot before the Pope. But they just, to my face, just constantly, treated me like I was some special crown jewel, And so I thought my position was going to be pretty secure. And they sent me home after Macias didn't want to sign a long-term contract with him. And, had anybody said, hey, we might want to change your gimmick, because, look, we watched them. Everybody has. They take acts who actually originally had some talent, and they screw them up, and then they repackage them and repackage them and repackage them, and every time they repackage them, they get worse and they get less over. So so we know that that's in their trick bag, is let's repackage somebody. Well, nobody ever even said that to me. I wasn't given the opportunity to at least to say, no, I don't want to do it, or shit, yeah, let's try. And I'm sitting around, and I called Terry Taylor. I said, Terry, look, you got several dates on my contract that are still open, that you still owe me. And, and they had already had to make like 2 or 3 big balloon payments to me over the years that I'd worked there, because they just stopped using me. In fact, every time I got hot, they took me off TV. So then I'd sit home, and then they'd have to pay my contract out.
I've never figured out, as a booker, I have never been paying someone and not booking them. I don't know how that works, but anyway.
Yeah, so I called him and I said, look, you guys are going to owe me many thousands of dollars. Is there something I can do to help? I'd love, to learn more of the backstage stuff, maybe sit in the truck with Sahadi, or you could certainly use my help producing promos for these guys and, that kind of thing. I said, I just want to earn my keep, and, my contract's about to roll over again. So I talked to him on the phone, sent him that email, and then I get a damn email back from Terry that says, please be advised that we're exercising our escape clause in your contract. And I'm really crestfallen. But at the time, I thought, okay, this is just the same shit they do. They're going to call me back in 6 months and go, oh, we need you, we fucked up, which is what they'd always done. So, I'd be in and out of there, but I was never really gone more than 6-7 months before, when the contracts would run out. And so I said, Terry, what's this all about? Did I piss somebody off? And me, backstage, I damn sure didn't want to heat with anybody, friendly. I'm trying to figure who I've pissed off. And he said, no, you haven't pissed anybody off, but we've just decided, he said, to be honest with you, he goes, we're going for a change in direction, and without being cruel or trying to hurt your feelings, you don't fit in. And I said, okay, well, I understand, fine. So then I wait to see this change in direction.
The change of direction, going away from people who are good speakers on television and more toward people who couldn't say suey if the hogs had them.
Yeah, so then the change of direction, as far as I can see it, is I'm not there, and they have more talking and less wrestling, and the people they have talking can't fucking talk, you know, and then Meryl Streep Carter comes in, and she gets on TV, and, you know, and I'm thinking, okay.
But then at least she proved you can still piss the fans off for real.
Yeah, but and then like in the middle there somewhere, like maybe 9-10 months down the road, I called Terry. I said, hey, Terry, could you guys use me back? I'm not on screen. Can you use me backstage for anything? You know, whatever. You got a million fucking agents and whatever flunkies running around, you know, I'll be a flunky. And he said, well, you've got heat with Dixie, but that's not your fault. I'm like, how do I have heat with Dixie? You know, the woman who had called me after I got fired and go, oh, Jim, everybody knows you're the best at what you do. We haven't closed the door on you. Everything, you know, you've been a great asset, all this bullshit. And now I'm hearing she's pissed off at me. And I didn't have any details as to, he did say, well.
He couldn't tell you?
He said this is the third or fourth time they had to do a big payout on you. And he said, so she's pretty mad about that. That's not your fault.
How's that your fault? She gave you the
how exactly? How's that my fault? So then fast forward up to recent history. And then it was revealed to me by your close personal friend, Vince Russo, that Dixie Carter fired me, wanted me gone, because according to him, that when people are, if I was getting real heat, people were booing and hissing me, that transferred into her saying he must not be a nice guy. Therefore, I don't want him here. He's a bad person. He's got heel heat. Therefore, he has to be fired. So
when you're talking about two people who would lie if their tongues were notarized, I'm not sure which one to believe, but that does sound like something that somebody that stupid about wrestling would say.
I don't even understand it. I'm still trying to process that whole sentence.
I'll tell you what.
Fuck?
It was like, you know, in the Looney Tunes when your head would spin around and go. Blah, 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 blah. I was like, what? Like Beetlejuice. I was like, what in the hell does that mean? That, you know, that should mean, hell yeah, we want this guy. He's got heat and he can talk and he can bullshit over. But no, hey, why would you want me when you can have a creative genius like Chrissy Hemme in the office or something?
I know. We got to bring it up. We brought that up when it first happened. We haven't mentioned that in a while. Ladies and gentlemen, Chrissy Hemme is a part of the TNA creative team. And I swear, I like Christy. I never had any words with her. She's a good ring announcer. Pretty girl, but on the creative, which is like, you know, me on the fucking shuttle project for NASA, for fuck's sake.
That's like me in the centerfold of fucking Playboy. You know, she's about as qualified to do that as I am to show my tits, you know, in a centerfold. And it's not a personal knock on her. I think all this stuff goes back to, you know, everything ultimately rests on the owner of the company. And if you're hiring people who are making stupid decisions, then you should fucking fire them. You know what I mean? Instead of pointing blame and saying this person did this and this person did that, I mean, like in New York, ultimately everything is Vince McMahon's decision, as I have heard. Is that true?
That is true. Well, it's either everything is either his decision or a decision that he would agree with or has already directed to be made in advance.
Right, and he would, you know, but he stands behind it. You know what I mean? In TNA, when something would go wrong, and again, I keep making references to cartoons, it's like when somebody fucks up and everybody starts pointing like a Mexican standoff of pointing fingers, you know, and try to get the hell out of Dodge. And what is, you know, as goofy as TNA was, I was certainly happy to be on a national platform, such as it was, but still a national platform, performing the art that I loved and being able to have some freedom to incorporate myself into it, and make it mine. So even when they did goofy shit, I just kept trying to do the best I could. It was my goal to go, I'm going to be the best promo on this show tonight. If nothing else, I can't control what Abyss does. I can't control what the bookers give me, but I can control my own performance. And
you usually, to be quite honest, you usually were, and in some cases it was like being the nicest guy in prison. It wasn't that hard, but you did. But you
right.
did. Oh my God!
I'm looking at the clock on the wall, and it looks like we're running out of time. But I have
one
quick question.
I forgot. You know what? I forgot we're on tape. We're doing a show. I thought I was just talking to the devil.
Yeah, but real quick, I was wondering if either of you could speak to the idea, because this is something that you both did in your career. Where did the managers go? I mean, I can think of
all the managers gone.
Off the top of my head, I can think of a couple, and one of them is Paul Heyman, because he's still around.
Right.
What happened to the people that used to do that exclusively because they were good at it and it made sense because some people couldn't speak for themselves?
Well,
is it a matter of that? Is it a matter of a transition to this sort of desire to want people to be everything? You have to be able to work and look good and talk and do all that fancy stuff, or what happened?
Well, it's just it's lack of wanting to push managers on the part of the industry leader, because he wants to make stars. He didn't even like tag teams because you don't want to tie two guys up in the same same act, as they say, and I hate that phrase. But there's Truth Martini in Ring of Honor. There is Heyman, and I guess Lana is a manager, but she,
she's
not
an actress,
not of the traditional kind.
Yeah.
I don't know, but at the same time, I always said if every wrestling promotion just decided, well, we need to start using managers again, and started using them, where would they come from? Because it's been so long.
I mean, there are plenty of shitty indie managers who didn't.
Yeah, but nobody knows what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing. They don't have any, which is also the problem with most of the fucking wrestlers now. Nobody is a star. I mean, there are people who are hardworking guys, athletic, and they try. Of course, they wrestle like a fucking video game, But nobody's
now.
Hey, don't star.
If you say that, the Young Bucks will block you on Twitter, devil.
The funny thing about nobody being a star is that it seems like in WWE, the whole point is that everybody's a superstar. But when everybody's a superstar, nobody's a superstar.
Nobody is. And think about it, Jim. In the old days, it took a certain kind of person to be a professional wrestler. And they didn't just let anybody in. They wouldn't let the tweeters, if those existed, the tweeters and the Facebookers and the PlayStation 2 guys in the locker room. These were fist-fighting, whore-mongering, tough guys who were as colorful out of the ring as they were in the ring, so they just put that naturally on screen, which made them as compelling as they would have been if they were causing shit in the middle of a Denny's.
I guess when you're a corporate entity, you can't have people that are dangerous anymore, can you?
You just said that better than they were fist-fighting, whore-mongering. And there are no Dick Murdochs and Abdullah the Butchers and Pampiro Furpos and Sheiks, and we could go on and on. But also, if the guys did have any personality, they're not allowed to show it today because, as everybody has said, when they walk in, from everybody that leaves says, when they walk in the locker room, they're all scared shitless like a dog shitting peach seeds. I can't say the wrong thing or offend anybody, so they sit in the corner and they be quiet. Nobody wants to pay to see people that sit in the corner and be quiet.
Well,
of course, they send them to NXT to reprogram them, their brains.
Yeah, and retrain them in the mind control. And the locker rooms 30 years ago for major territories were like if all the old vaudeville performers were staying at the same hotel and hanging around the lobby. The locker room was a show place because everybody was doing their bits. But now it's like, oh, we do,
And where are you going to get them? Like I've had this theory. I'm glad indie wrestling is called indie wrestling because it's not professional wrestling. Okay, when I started, I'm sure the resume I sent you said I have done outlaw shows for 2 years in the Carolinas. They were outlaw shows. Then I don't know when the word independent started, but then it morphed into indie. But as this has happened, what you've got is not professional wrestling. You've got something that takes the general platform of a scripted, predetermined fight and a story that is supposed to be told in the ring. But then you combine it with a different kind of person, a person whose mindset is all about video games and high spots and getting your shit in and doing what you saw in the Mortal Kombat video or whatever the hell they're called, cutting flips and doing crazy shit. And they don't have personality. They don't, if 10 people or 100 people say that was awesome, that's their idea of telling a story. That means they did it good. So when you combine pro wrestling with this video game shit, you don't have pro wrestling, you have indie wrestling, which is it's kind of like wrestling, but it's not. You're not pros because you're not making any fucking money doing it. Most of them aren't. It's like a big backyard wrestling fest where everybody jerks each other off and they get on Facebook and say, man, great job tonight in front of those 40 people, man. You're the big, and
Devil, let me give you a word that you'll love.
Let me
give you a word you'll love. Don't say indie.
Say
I said, let me give you a word you'll love. Don't say indie. It's shindy. The shit indies. I love shindy. It's one of my favorite words.
I like that.
All right, you two have just completely. I've enjoyed this today because the devil tickles me, and also because you should have your own podcast. Maybe we ought to talk to Court Bauer at MLW Radio and see if he gives Mitchell his own podcast and pays him as poorly as he pays the rest of us. That's what we gotta do. But since this is the longest ever episode of the Jim Cornette Experience, we better wrap it up. But that leaves so much more for part 2 because the devil can go on for days, and we didn't even get to talk about religion, so we got to do it again.
Oh, yeah, we'll do it again.
But thank you very much, Father James Mitchell.
Alice, Jim, a pleasure. Very nice.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it tremendously. And where can people go and see you if you care to have them do such a thing when you're doing your thing?
If you're vacationing in the Orlando area, I am at the Summer Bay Resort. I think it's now called the Summer Bay Exploria Resort on Highway 192 in, I guess it's called Davenport or Claremont, but just look it up in Orlando. The Summer Bay Resort. I am also at the...
Everybody followed that, but...
Let's try that again. I am at the Summer Bay Resort in Orlando. You can find that. I am also at the Tuscana Resort in Champions Gate, Florida, which is still basically right around the corner from here. And in the summer, I can be found at the Westgate Vacation Resort. So I stay busy 6 days a week, singing or DJing or whatever, and just generally inciting people to buy drinks. So if you're vacationing, make one of those places your destination, and I'll buy you a beer or something.